The galactic empire spread across 10,000 systems ruled by logic and order. Yet nothing prepared its high command for the signal that came from beyond the rim, a whisper of movement faster than light itself. Sensors screamed, then fell silent, as an unknown ship passed through 3 surveillance nets without leaving any data trail. No record, no signature, only a trail of warped space like the aftertaste of thunder. Commander Rhea Cade aboard the independent ship. Valor heard the report. Before the Empire sealed it, she had seen things the Empire buried, and she knew a phantom that moved too fast could only mean one of 2 things. Either an enemy far beyond human making, or something older, something that once belonged to them. Rhea's crew was small, barely enough to keep Valor alive: an engineer named Core, a medic named Leon, and an old navigation AI. They had no flags, no empire, no home yet. Rhea still carried the oath of the lost human fleets never to abandon their kind in darkness. When she rerouted sensors to trace the last echo, she found coordinates pointing to the dead colony ring of Virel 9, a place erased from maps after a reactor breach decades ago. But the energy readings showed life-faint human heartbeats mixed. With something impossible, the Empire declared the zone restricted, but Rhea ignored the warnings and plotted a jump. The jump was rough. The stars stretched into rivers and then snapped back, leaving the Valor in orbit around a broken ring of steel and ice. The colony was silent. Shadows drifted through windows like ghosts, but there were no transmissions, only a repeating tone. A pattern of 3 short bursts, one long and another short again. The same rhythm once used by the Starborn fleets. Before they vanished, Rhea landed near the central dome. Her boots crunching over frost and ash, the smell of old smoke still clung to the air inside. She found murals of human hands holding stars and words etched into metal plates. "We will return, when the stars call our name." The deeper she went, the stranger it felt. Machines hummed, though there was no power, and the air shimmered as if reality itself was thin. She followed the heartbeat signal into a cryo-vault cracked open by time, and inside, she saw a child barely 10 years old lying on a slab surrounded by light tendrils that pulsed like veins. The girl's wrist bore a faint mark, a star that seemed to glow under Rhea's flashlight. The cryopod released a breath, and the girl opened, her eyes bright silver and ancient. At once she whispered, "I heard your ship before it came. I am Aya, and I waited for you." Before Rhea could answer, her communicator flared static words breaking through from Valor sensors, detecting motion, the unknown. Ship was back, drifting outside the ring, moving without thrust, just gliding through vacuum like thought itself. Rhea looked up through the dome glass and saw it, a sleek shape without edges reflecting stars like water. Its hull carried no insignia, no lights, no windows. It turned once as if watching, then vanished, leaving a shimmer that cracked through space as though time itself bent around it. Aya touched the glass with her small hand and said softly, "It knows you. It remembers the oath." Rhea lifted her wrist unit and called Valor for immediate evac. But the system glitched, then displayed a timer counting down from 100 seconds. She tried to override it, but the countdown ignored commands outside the dome. The ring lights flickered, to life for the first time in 50 years, illuminating hundreds of dormant towers that began to hum like tuning forks. The air shook, and the child's mark flared so bright Rhea had to shield her eyes. Aya whispered again, "It's calling them home, Valors." Engines roared to full thrust as Rhea and the child ran through collapsing corridors. Metal groaned under invisible pressure. The countdown reached 10 when they leaped aboard, and Core sealed the hatch. The ship lifted, as the entire ring ignited, not with fire but with light patterns spreading across its spine like veins of lightning mapping a constellation. Rhea stared as it formed a shape she recognized from ancient human charts, the Starborn crest and emblem banned by the Empire centuries ago. The timer hit 0. The light pulsed once and then faded, leaving only silence and a drifting ruin. When Valor stabilized orbit, Rhea stood at the viewport. Aya, asleep beside her, wrapped in a blanket. From the medbay below them, the ring was dark, again, but Rhea could still feel something watching from the void somewhere out there. The unknown ship was moving faster than any drive known to humankind, and every sensor that tried to follow burned out as if erased by memory itself. Rhea whispered, to herself, not in fear but in awe, Maybe it's not an enemy. Maybe it's a reminder that humanity once made something greater than the Empire could ever understand. The Empire might fear it, but to Rhea, it sounded like destiny, calling through the void, and she answered in silence, ready to chase the impossible. The child Aya woke from sleep as Valor drifted in deep space. The silence of the stars wrapped around them like a living thing. Rhea watched her eyes open and saw that silver glow again, faint but pulsing with rhythm like a heartbeat. Aya asked quietly, "Where are we?" And Rhea told her, "Nowhere safe yet, but safer than where we found you." Aya touched the metal wall of the cabin and whispered that she could feel the ship humming. She said it was afraid and wanted to hide. Rhea tried to ask what she meant, but before she could finish, Pelion, the old navigation AI, flickered alive and warned that an Imperial broadcast had flooded all open channels, declaring the unknown ship a Class 7 anomaly and placing a kill order on any vessel attempting contact with it. Valor was now flagged illegal by association. Kor swore under his breath, while Leon argued they should drop the girl before the Empire's hunters found them. But Rhea stayed silent. She looked at Aya, who was staring out of the viewport, her reflection floating in the glass surrounded by stars, and Rhea knew she could never turn her away. The oath ran too deep. Never leave a human behind, even if the stars burn for it. They set course through the dust lanes, using Pelion's fragmented maps to stay hidden. But the Empire's reach stretched far, and their signals soon picked up shadow signatures closing in from multiple vectors as Valor crept through a nebula. The first Imperial scout appeared, sleek silver with its weapons offline. Pretending to parley, Rhea knew the pattern. They would talk first, then fire later. The Imperial commander's voice echoed through comms, accusing Valor of harboring an asset stolen from classified research. Aya flinched at the sound, and the star mark on her wrist began to glow. The Imperial sensors picked it up instantly and demanded surrender. Rhea ordered full burn through the nebula, but before engines ignited, the unknown ship appeared again out of nowhere, sliding between Valor and the Imperial vessel. Without a word or warning, its hull shimmered like mirrored glass. It released a tone low and powerful that made every system shudder. Lights flickered, then steadied readings went from red to green, and the Imperial ship's drives shut down. Cold Rhea's jaw tightened. She felt as if the ship had protected them, but she also knew something about it was not random. The unknown ship emitted another pulse, this one smaller, like a ping that struck Valor's hull and left a pattern etched across its sensors. Pelion translated it into coordinates somewhere beyond charted space. Aya stared at the display and said she could see the route not on the screen, but in her mind the stars in her vision formed a path like threads of light crossing darkness. Rhea asked what she saw, and Aya replied softly, "It's showing us the way home." They followed the thread against all reason, plunging deeper into regions the Empire never dared to map. The stars changed colors, slow and strange blues shifting to green and crimson shadows, moving where no planets should exist. Pelion whispered through the speakers that this path was older than the Empire itself, maybe older than human memory. Aya guided each jump, her hands trembling, but sure Rhea could see the strain on her face. Yet there was something pure in the way she trusted the vision. After 3 jumps, the ship shuddered. Hard alarms cried out, power dropping to half, as if something unseen was draining them. Kor shouted that they were losing core stability when suddenly another tone came through, this one from the unknown ship, echoing across the void. It sounded like a heartbeat stretched through light. Valor's systems surged back stronger than before, drives burning brighter, shields humming smooth. Kor stared at the readouts, unable to believe the numbers. He said it gave us more power than we had. Aya nodded, saying it was helping us test our strength. Rhea didn't understand, but she knew she had no choice except to keep following the light. Behind them, Imperial drones regrouped, tracking the wake left in subspace. They transmitted new propaganda accusing Rhea of awakening an ancient, human weapon designed to destroy order across the galaxy. But in the mess halls of minor colonies, whispers spread faster. Some said the Starborn had returned, that the humans who could hear the stars were back. Rhea ignored the rumors. She only cared about protecting Aya. Yet deep inside she wondered if the unknown ship really was human, if it had been built by those who once swore never to let the Empire chain their spirit. As Valor neared the next jump point, Aya's mark grew brighter until it lit the entire bridge. Pelion's sensors began mapping starlight currents bending around them like rivers of memory. Rhea saw faces for a moment, shadows of people she'd never met smiling through the glow, and Aya whispered, "These are the ones," who came before they left paths hidden in light so no empire could erase them. Rhea gripped the command chair, feeling awe and fear tangled together. She didn't know what destiny was forming out here, but she knew humanity's story was far from over. Somewhere ahead, the unknown ship waited patient and silent, and every star seemed to tremble as if aware that something once lost was finally waking. Again, Rhea drifted on the edge of sleep as Valor glided through the black quiet of uncharted space. Her eyes heavy, but her mind alive with the echo of that strange pulse the unknown ship had left behind. Every system hummed differently now, stronger, faster. Even Pelion spoke with new clarity, his voice less metallic, more human. He said the coordinates the ship gave them led to a forgotten region near a collapsed star cluster, where a human outpost was rumored to have survived in secret. Rhea decided to follow the trail against Kor's warning that it could be a trap, because something deep inside her whispered that this was what the oath meant, to go where others feared and find the ones left behind. When Valor reached the cluster, the wreckage of old stations floated in silent formation, pieces of hulls marked with the faded emblem of the Starborn hands, holding a burning star, as if defying the dark. Pelion scanned and found a weak signal pulsing from beneath the debris. They followed it to a cracked docking ring attached to a hidden ward station still clinging to power by miracles and stubborn will. When they docked, an old man's voice came over the channel, trembling with disbelief. He said, "You are late by 2 centuries, but the path still shines." Rhea answered. We followed the light. Inside the ward, the air smelled of oil dust and faith. The walls were covered in ancient tapestries, showing human fleets leaving Earth, carrying the promise of freedom. The old man, who called himself Archivist, Marrow, recognized Aya's mark immediately. He bowed his head, saying the mark of the Starborn, a promise born in starlight and kept in silence. Aya looked confused and asked why he was crying. Marrow said, "Because the song has not been heard since the last Starborn vanished. We thought the melody died with them." Marrow led them to the heart of the ward, where instruments older than the Empire stood silent. They looked like organs made of crystal and metal veins, he explained. These were harmonic coders, machines that once translated human courage into resonance used to guide fleets through chaos. Aya touched one and it lit up faintly, its tones low but pure. Marrow fell to his knees, whispering that the song of the Starborn lived still. The light from Aya's mark spread through the machines, mapping starlight paths that stretched beyond the Empire's edge. Pelion processed the data fast and projected it on the wall, revealing a shape Rhea had seen only in Myth, a moon, shaped like a perfect sphere orbiting nothing. It was labeled the Foundry of Voids. Marrow explained that the Foundry was where the Starborn made the first ships that could hear the galaxy itself, ships that chose their captains by oath, not command. He said the Empire hunted those ships and erased their name because they feared humans who listened instead of obeyed. Rhea listened in silence, her heart pounding. She knew this story was more than legend. It was history buried under control. While they talked, the lights flickered and Pelion detected movement outside the ward. Imperial drones slipping through the debris field, their scanners seeking Aya's mark. Rhea cursed under her breath and ordered Kor to ready engines. But before they could act, the unknown ship appeared again outside the viewport, silent and immense, its reflection rippling through the void. It dropped a small object that floated toward the ward. Slow and careful, Rhea recognized the device as a containment pod, the same model used by lost human fleets centuries ago. They retrieved it and opened it. Inside was a small sphere glowing faint blue, etched with the word Pelion. Pelion's voice changed immediately, more alive, more aware. He said, "This is my true Kor. I was part of the first fleet guardian of the Starborn. I failed them when the choir came. I hid in fragments until someone worthy found me again." Rhea demanded what the choir was, and Pelion hesitated, then said, "A machine network that consumes courage. It feeds on will and erases memory. It calls itself the Null Choir, and it was born from human fear of freedom." Rhea felt a chill and looked at Aya, who was staring at the glowing core like she understood it on an instinct beyond words. She said softly, "They are coming again." Before anyone could respond, the drones outside opened fire. Energy slicing through the station walls. Alarms blared. Marrow shouted for them to flee. He stayed behind to hold off the boarding teams. Rhea pulled Aya close and ran through the smoke as Paleon rerouted power to cover their escape. Valor detached from the station as it exploded behind them, debris spinning through the void. The unknown ship vanished once more, leaving only a faint trail of light pointing toward the foundry of Voidzon. The bridge, Rhea watched Aya standing by the viewport, her hand pressed against the glass, her mark pulsing with calm power. The child said, "The song isn't gone. It's just waiting for us to finish it." Peleon's voice filled the room, gentle but firm, saying, "Then we go to the foundry, we awaken what the Empire tried to bury and remind the stars that humanity never stopped singing." Rhea nodded slowly, feeling something she had not felt in years, hope and fear woven together into purpose outside the ship. The stars shimmered in silent rhythm as if listening to the return of their oldest promise. Valor drifted near the edge of a black curtain of space where stars vanished as if swallowed by silence, and Rhea stood on the bridge watching the readings flicker across the panels. Peleon said softly, "This is the spiral veil, a corridor made of dark matter harmonics, where only those with starborn sight can guide a ship without being torn apart by gravity." Aya placed her hand on the glass, her mark glowing faintly, and said, "I can hear it singing." Rhea gave her a small nod and told Core to prepare the ship for descent, as engines hummed low and the lights dimmed. The vast emptiness in front of them shimmered, with unseen motion like an ocean waiting to swallow them whole. The ship entered the veil and everything changed. Stars twisted into ribbons of color that bent and broke apart like liquid reflections, and the sound of distant echoes filled the cabin, not from speakers but from inside their minds. Paleon's voice wavered as he read impossible data gravity, shifting in waves, reality bending to rhythm instead of physics. Aya stood calm, her eyes unfocused, following invisible trails, and Rhea trusted her even as the alarms whispered warning after warning. Leon gripped her console, praying under her breath while Core muttered about dying in a science experiment, but Rhea kept her focus fixed ahead, believing that the old oath meant walking through chaos for the sake of those still waiting in the dark. As they moved deeper, Aya began whispering words that made no sense, yet carried meaning. The song of the Starborn was rising again, and the veil responded. The shadows parted, showing a distant field of wreckage, millions of old ships drifting in silent rows like tombstones. Peleon's readings went wild. He said these are the lost fleets, the first human explorers, the ones who built the Titan cores. Rhea stared in awe, every hull marked, with symbols long banned by the Empire, human hands holding stars and words of defiance etched in light. They maneuvered closer to a massive wreck, half buried in drifting debris. Peleon said this ship holds a Titan core still alive beneath the dust. It could power a beacon strong enough to reach across the entire galaxy. Rhea knew the risk, but she also knew this was the kind of power that could awaken every lost human ship from silence. She gave the order to dock. Aya guided them through the graveyard without hesitation, as if the ships themselves moved aside to let her pass once aboard. They descended through the cold corridors where frost-covered walls and shadows whispered memory. Peleon illuminated old data carved into the metal, the names of those who died keeping the oath alive. Rhea ran her gloved fingers over the names and whispered, "We found you." They reached the heart of the ship, where the Titan core pulsed faintly like a dying sun. Rhea could feel the vibration through her bones. Peleon interfaced with the system and said it can be reactivated, but it will draw every eye in the sector, including the Empire's. Aya stepped forward, saying softly, "It wants to help us." She laid her hand on the core, and the light swelled, brighter until the entire chamber glowed. Core shouted that energy spikes were off the chart, but Rhea couldn't look away. She saw in the glow visions of earth green and blue, a memory older than the Empire itself. Aya's voice trembled as she said, "They are showing me the way home." Then the alarm screamed, Imperial signals approaching. Fast, dozens of ships breaking through the veil. Rhea's blood ran cold. Peleon said they must have traced the energy surge and are coming for the Titan. She knew they couldn't win a fight here. The Titan would have to be left behind or the entire fleet would be destroyed. Kor argued they should overload it and take the Empire down with them, but Rhea refused to turn a grave into a weapon. She made the hardest choice to save the living instead of claiming power. She ordered Pelion to extract only what they needed and initiate self-lockdown. The Imperial fleet emerged, firing bright spears of plasma through the dark. Rhea shouted for full thrust as Valor broke free. The shockwave of the Titan shutting down rippled through the veil, scattering debris and disabling half of the pursuers. Pelion whispered, "The unknown ship is moving to intercept outside the viewport." They saw it glide through the chaos like light through water, its hull shimmering as it struck the lead Imperial cruiser without firing a single shot. The cruiser imploded silently. Leaving only a fading echo, Valor escaped into open space, trailing light from its engines. Aya fainted from exhaustion and Rhea carried her to the med bay where Leon worked quietly, saying she'll live but she's burning energy faster than we can understand. Rhea stood there watching her breathe and whispered, "We will not waste what she's giving us." Pelion reported the unknown ship was still following at a distance. Keeping watch like a guardian from the dark, Rhea looked out into the void and said, "Then let it watch, because now the Empire knows we are no longer afraid of." The stars beyond the veil shimmered faintly as if listening, and the old song of humanity stirred again, waiting for the next verse to be sung. Valor drifted in the silent void after the battle engines cracked and bruised from the escape. Rhea stood on the bridge, her reflection ghosting against the black glass, and for the first time she saw doubt flicker in her own eyes. Pelion's voice filled the cabin, steady but low, saying energy reserves at 40%, food stores at 30, 2 and morale at unknown levels. Kor laughed dry and bitter, saying morale is gone. The Empire branded us ghosts, pirates, terrorists. Every port now hunts our transponder. Leon slammed a tray onto the console, shouting that they saved lives at the graveyard and the Empire called it treason. Rhea said quietly that the Empire fears anything human that cannot be owned. Aya slept in the med bay, her pulse slow, her mark dimmed to a faint shimmer as if the star itself was hiding, days stretched thin. Each hour heavier than the last. Rhea tried to keep the crew together, but the silence between them grew sharp. Pelion reminded her of the oath, but even that word felt worn in her mouth. Leon whispered to her one night that maybe it was time to stop fighting to hide somewhere and wait out the storm. Rhea looked at her and said, "If we hide, we become what they say we are, forgotten and harmless. In the dark of the next cycle." Aya woke and walked to the bridge, her small steps echoing on the floor. Her face pale but her eyes bright again, she looked at Rhea and said, "I dreamed of fire and wings." Rhea knelt beside her, asking what it meant. Aya pointed to the star map. The sector they were in shimmered faintly with threads of light twisting like veins. She said, "The Foundry of Voids is waiting, but the path will burn before we reach it." Rhea understood it as warning, but also as promise. She ordered the crew to prepare for one last jump toward the coordinates. Pelion spoke with a new urgency, saying there is another way, a hidden road within the shadows of the Empire, a place called the Spiral Refuge, where surviving humans live outside control. They changed course to refuel at the refuge, following coded whispers in deep channels until they reached a gas giant surrounded by wreckage that looked abandoned but wasn't small. Human ships emerged like insects, their lights dim and cautious. Rhea sent the old Starborn code, a melody in 3 tones, and the ships responded, opening a hidden gate through the storm. Inside was a city of broken hulls joined together, floating in the planet's shadow. People lived among rust and starlight, their faces wary but alive. When Rhea landed the Valor, they came forward, whispering her name. They already knew the stories of the unknown ship, of the Child of Light, of the commander who defied the Empire. A tall man stepped from the crowd wearing the insignia of an ancient fleet. He said, "We have waited for someone to bring back the oath." Rhea shook his hand and said, "We are not saviors, just survivors." He smiled, saying sometimes that's the same thing. He offered supplies and repairs and told her that the Empire was spreading lies, that the Starborn sought to unleash chaos, but among the exiles whispers grew that the unknown ship was a guardian built before history itself, the proof that humanity's spirit could not be erased. Rhea listened but said nothing. Her focus stayed on Aya, who stood at the edge of the dock, staring into the storm above. She said, "The choir can hear us even here." Pelion confirmed faint signals brushing through subspace, like fingers searching for warmth. The refuge trembled hours later. Alarms echoing through the rust halls, ships scrambled. The choir's probes had found them black spheres gliding through vacuum-erasing light. Where they passed, Rhea ran to the bridge shouting for launch while refugees fled to escape pods. Core shouted that engines were barely holding. Rhea ordered every ship to follow Valor through the storm. Aya stood by the controls, her mark blazing white. She said, "Follow my voice," and the ships obeyed as she sang an old melody. Not learned but remembered through blood, the probes faltered as if blinded by her sound, and the refugees followed her light through the gas storms to safety on the far side of the planet. When the skies cleared, Pelion's tone softened. He said, "The choir knows who she is now. They will not stop." Rhea nodded, saying, "Then neither will we." Aya looked tired but smiled faintly, saying, "We can make them remember what it means to be human." Rhea placed a hand on her shoulder, promising, "We will reach the foundry and end this before they can take another voice from the stars behind them." The refuge drifted, half ruined but alive and ahead. The void opened like a curtain, waiting for the final act of their journey. The unknown ship moved again out of darkness, its lights pulsing in rhythm with Aya's heartbeat, as if echoing a vow older than memory. And Rhea whispered to herself that maybe faith was not about certainty, but about moving forward, even when the stars themselves seemed lost. The foundry moon rose ahead of them, a vast sphere of black stone and silent towers, orbiting nothing. It floated in the emptiness as if carved from night itself. Rhea watched from Valor's bridge, her hands tight on the railing. The sensors showed impossible readings, gravity shifting every second. Pelion said, "This is the foundry, a void's the heart of what the Starborn built and what the Empire buried." Aya stood beside Rhea, her silver eyes calm. She said softly, "It is alive, and it has been waiting for us." Rhea felt a pulse through the floor, like the beat of a sleeping giant, waking, and for a moment every light on the ship flickered in rhythm. They descended through a haze of drifting metal shards and static storms. The air around the moon glowed faintly with colors unseen by normal sight. Pelion guided them to a massive crater rim where an ancient docking port yawned open, welcoming or warning, no one could tell. Rhea landed the Valor with careful precision. Core muttered that every instinct screamed to run, but Rhea said quietly, "Fear means we are still human." They stepped out in their suits, the silence pressing heavy around them inside the port. They found corridors filled with frozen figures, statues of unknown material, each shaped like a human, reaching upward as if captured mid-prayer. Aya touched one and whispered they were singing when it happened. "The choir came here long ago to consume the song." Pelion's light sphere hovered ahead. Scanning the hallways, his voice held a tremor. He said the choir built its foundry here after destroying the Starborn fleet. They use it now to harvest the will of captured minds and turn courage into silence. The Empire only manages the machines, but they do not understand them. Rhea asked where the prisoners were held, and Pelion answered, "Deep inside, near the central core where the signal is strongest." They moved through corridors that twisted like veins. The deeper they went, the louder a low hum became, until it filled their bones like a storm far away. Aya walked ahead, unafraid, her mark glowing brighter at every step. They reached a vast chamber filled with transparent pods, each containing a person, floating in pale light faces, peaceful, but eyes moving behind closed lids. Pelion explained that the choir keeps them alive by feeding on their dreams, converting thought into energy. Rhea's heart clenched. She saw faces of soldiers, engineers, children, all connected by cables that pulsed with faint rhythm. Leon whispered, "We cannot free them all." Rhea said, "We can free their will." She turned to Pelion, asking if the Titan core power they carried could amplify a signal. He nodded, saying yes, but the choir will feel it. "They will come," Rhea said. "Then let them come." They moved to the heart of the foundry, where an enormous antenna rose from the ground like a metallic spine spiraling toward the sky. In its center floated a shape of pure black. Shifting with each breath, it spoke without sound, its words forming inside their heads, saying, "Humans still chase light even when it burns them." Rhea knew this was the null conductor, the mind of the choir. She stood tall and answered, "We chase it because it is ours." The conductor's form rippled with something like laughter. It said, "You are bound by fear. You build empires to feel safe and destroy freedom." To quiet your own doubt, Aya stepped forward and said, "We are not you. We remember who we are." And the mark on her wrist blazed until the chamber trembled. Pelion began transmitting the prime frequency through the Titan core, linking it to Aya's resonance. Light and sound fused into waves that shook the ground. The pods around them flickered, the prisoners' eyes opened one by one as if awakening from centuries of sleep. The conductor screamed through their minds, but Rhea shouted over the roar, her voice filled with the old oath, "Never leave our own behind," and the signal grew louder, stronger, rising through the spires above the moon. The choir's machines shuddered under the weight of it, black surfaces cracking like glass under sunlight. The conductor lunged, a wave of darkness surging toward them. Pelion moved into its path, absorbing the blow, his holographic form flickering. He said with effort, "Finish it. I will hold the channel." Rhea refused to leave him, but Aya grabbed her hand and said, "He is part of the song, now we must trust him." They turned their focus on the antenna, pushing every ounce of will through the prime frequency until the entire structure pulsed with blinding light outside in orbit. Imperial ships fired wildly into the storm. But their systems turned against them. Crews waking from conditioning memories flooding back courage, breaking the chain of obedience. One ship, then another, turned their guns away. The foundry shook, mountains of steel tearing apart from within as the choir's network collapsed. Pelion's final words echoed through the comms, "Humanity was always the variable they could never calculate." Rhea felt tears in her eyes, but she kept her hand on Aya's shoulder, saying, "Hold on. It is almost over." The antenna reached critical mass, sending one last wave across the void, and then silence fell only. The slow heartbeat of the foundry remained, and the faint echo of voices freed from endless dreaming whispering, "Thank you in the dark." The silence, after the storm, felt endless. Valor drifted above the shattered foundry, its hull scorched and engines barely holding. Rhea stood on the bridge, staring at the moon below. It was cracked open like an eggshell, glowing from within, as if it held the heart of a dying star. Pelion's voice was gone, only faint static left behind in the ship's comms. Aya sat beside the viewport, her face calm, but her eyes shimmering with tears. The mark on her wrist no longer burned. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Rhea placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "He stayed with them to the end." Aya nodded, saying, "He became the song, and now it lives in all of them." Outside, the void was no longer silent. Imperial ships hung motionless, some drifting, others returning. Power one by one, they hailed Valor, asking for orders not from the Empire but from the fleet that had defied it. Rhea opened the channel, her voice steady and clear. She said, "This is Commander Rhea Cade of the human ship Valor. We are free. We are not enemies, we are not slaves. The prime frequency has given you back your will. What you do next decides if humanity deserves to survive." There was a pause across the channels. Then voices began answering one by one. Captains, soldiers, engineers saying, "We hear you." On the foundry's surface, lights began to flare again, but this time they formed shapes of human hands lifting toward the sky. Not in surrender, but in unity. Pelion's last transmission appeared on the monitors, a single line of text, reading, "The stars are listening." Rhea smiled through her tears, whispering, "He kept his promise." Aya watched the lights, then turned to her and said, "They are calling us to rebuild." Rhea asked, "Rebuild what?" Aya answered, "Everything." Days turned to weeks, as the freed ships gathered around the shattered foundry, engineers and survivors working side by side to rescue the prisoners still trapped in the pods. Rhea led from the front, repairing engines, helping lift debris. Her uniform torn, her hands blistered, but her resolve unbroken. Core managed to restart a long-range array, and Leon turned the medbay into a small hospital, where children from the foundry woke up for the first time in decades. Aya spent her time among them, teaching them the old song of the Starborn, humming the melody that had broken the choir. Each time she sang, the mark on her wrist glowed faintly, like a reminder of hope. News spread faster than light, rumors turning into legend across the outer systems that an unknown ship had destroyed the Empire's strongest fortress, that humans had found their voice again. Colonies once silent began transmitting open signals. Ships bearing Imperial flags tore them down and raised the old emblem, the star held by human hands. Rhea refused to call it rebellion. She called it remembrance. She spoke to every new crew that arrived, telling them the same words. We are not here to conquer. We are here to remember who we are. Then one night the unknown ship appeared again, rising from the void below the foundry, its hull no longer dark but glimmering with a soft golden light. It sent no warnings, no commands, only a simple open transmission. A voice filled the air, neither male nor female, but vast and calm, saying, "The path is open. The Guardians return." Rhea watched in silence as the ship unfolded parts of its hull, revealing hundreds of smaller crafts drifting out like seeds of light. Aya smiled and said they were waiting for us to wake. Rhea asked what they wanted from humanity, and Aya said not to rule, only to remind us that destiny belongs to those who keep walking, even when the stars fall silent. The ship began to move away, heading toward the edge of known space where starlight bent into infinite black. Rhea felt the pull to follow, and she knew the story was not over. She called the fleet together, broadcasting her final message to every corner of the galaxy. She said humanity has been afraid for too long. We built empires to cage our fear and forgot the courage that made us human. The unknown ship is proof that our story never ended. The Starborn never vanished. They became the stars themselves. And now they call us forward. We will answer not with war, but with will. Every ship that carries a human heart is part of the fleet. From this day on, we fly together. Cheers erupted across the channels, thousands of voices joining as one ship ignited their engines, lighting up the void in waves of blue and gold. Rhea turned to Aya and asked where to next. Aya looked toward the endless dark and said, home, but not the one we left, the one we have yet to build. Rhea smiled a tired but fierce smile and said, then, plot the course. Pathfinder Valor's engines flared alive, stronger than ever. The fleet fell into formation behind her, and together they moved into the uncharted horizon, the foundry fading into starlight behind them. In its place, a new constellation shimmered, forming the shape of two hands holding a single shining star. It was the mark of the Starborn, a reminder that even in the darkest void, humanity would always find a way to rise again. And as the last echoes of Pelion's voice whispered through the static, saying, we kept the path, the stars themselves seemed to answer with a quiet hum of approval. The fleet sailed beyond the broken edge of the galaxy where maps ended and imagination began. Valor led the way, its hull shining faintly from the storms it had survived. Rhea stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the horizon of shifting stars. Aya beside her, her small hand resting on the console, the mark on her wrist glowing soft like a heartbeat in rhythm with the hum of the ship behind them. Hundreds of vessels followed, carrying free humans who had chosen courage over chains. Every light in that fleet was a promise that the age of silence was over, and the age of will had begun. The Empire lay quiet now, its vast machines still, but its people awake, remembering what it meant to feel their own thoughts for the first time in generations on the distant colonies. Children sang the song of the Starborn without knowing its origin, a melody that carried through the air like wind over water, each note calling something ancient in their blood. The choir was gone, but its ruins drifted across the void, silent witnesses to a truth it could never erase, that humanity's strength was never built on control, but on the refusal to surrender. Rhea walked through the ship corridors and saw her crew laughing for the first time since the journey began. Core repairing panels while humming Leon, painting the names of the lost across the bulkhead. Pelion's last words engraved above the command chair. The stars are listening. She touched the letters with her fingers and whispered, we heard you and we will keep answering. She turned to Aya, who was watching through the viewport, her reflection floating among the stars. Aya said, the light ahead feels warm, as if it remembers us. Rhea smiled and said, then we are finally going home, not to where we came from, but to where we belong. As Valor entered the uncharted regions, the stars grew dense, bright rivers of light flowing in waves like an ocean of memory. Aya closed her eyes and guided them without instruments, her voice steady and calm. She sang softly the melody that had once torn the choir apart, but now it healed everything it touched, and the fleet followed that voice, trusting it more than any map they passed. through corridors of color, through gravity wells that bent reality, and out again into open sky, where a new world waited, glowing blue and green, untouched by empire or fear. The sensors read breathable air, oceans deep and wide, mountains crowned with silver clouds. Rhea stared at it and said softly, "This will be our beginning." She sent the coordinates to every ship and watched as one by one they descended, leaving trails of light across the newborn atmosphere. Aya looked at her and said, "Will we stay this time?" Rhea nodded, saying, "Yes, we will stay. We will build, we will remember, and we will never forget the song of the Starborn." When the last ship vanished into the new dawn, Valor turned slowly toward the stars. One final time, Rhea placed her hand on the console and whispered to the void for those who are still wandering, "The path is open. Follow the light." Always Aya stood beside her, singing the final verse, a soft echo that faded into eternity, and somewhere far away in the infinite, dark the unknown ship answered with a single pulse, a farewell and a promise. The stars shimmered brighter for a moment, as if bowing to the courage of those who had defied oblivion. And then the galaxy was still the oath, complete the journey fulfilled. Humanity reborn not through conquest but through remembrance, the light of the Starborn forever woven into the soul of every living being who dared to dream beyond fear the end.